All right, well, welcome back. We're going to continue on with Sukkot today, but let's begin with the blowing of the shofar as we have been starting each one of those. So, all right, the blessing again is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshonu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'shmo kol shofar. Deserving of praise are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with your commandments and commanded us to hear your voice, your still small voice, through the sound of the shofar. Father, we just continue to pray for our hearts to be encouraged and drawn closer to you, Lord, that we would cast out all fear, we would cast all despair, but Lord, instead we would just lean on you and we cleave to you and hang on to you and your word. Lord, for our hope is in you. We give you praise and glory. B'Shem Yeshua. In the name of Messiah. Amen. Tekiah. Shivarim. Teruah. Tekiah Gedolah. Hallelujah. May we be worthy. Hear this great shofar sound ushering in the Messiah. All right, as I said, we're going to be covering Sukkot today. If you took a look at this, you're going to see, hey, wait a second, where'd this come from? We'll get to it, don't you worry. Before we get too far into this, was there any specific questions somebody had from this week's chapter before I get too far, just to make sure I cover that question you may have? Yes.
I missed last week. What chapter was that?
Last week was Yom Kippur. This week we're in Sukkot.
Okay, but was it, you mean in the book chapter?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So this week we're going to be covering Sukkot. I believe you should have got my email with the link from last week. Okay. And you guys showed back up, so I guess I wasn't too controversial. All right. So let's move on. So again, we have, this is the completion of the wedding portion of Messiah's second coming, if you will. The second part of the wedding, the Nisuim. And so we have the blowing of the shofar, we have the preparation, getting ready. The bridegroom is coming, and it's being declared before him. And we'll keep that in mind because we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And also at the same time, the book of judgment is open, which is whether we are worthy to be called his bride. That part of that process begins. That closes at the end of Yom Kippur, the day of judgment, the day of atonement, where we stand sealed with our names written in the book of life. Now we get to this place called Sukkot, or Feast of Tabernacles, where what we're going to see is this is the time in which God wanted to dwell with his people, and afterwards, that's also the time where we have a party, if you will. So we're going to cover Sukkot and some of the details of essentially the wedding party, the wedding supper of the Lamb, if you will, that it mentions in Revelations that we talked about. So this is the wedding supper of the Lamb, essentially, and we're going to talk about the components. And again, come back to what we started last week in the dual parallels, if you will, of the festival. So if you remember last week, we talked about Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, and Hebrews chapter 8, and connecting that to Messiah's death, and how the connection with the scapegoat fits with Isaiah 53. We didn't necessarily fully cover it, but that covered the redemption, and we're looking for the day of salvation. And so that's the first part, and then the second part will be, this will be the wedding ceremony, this will be the freedom, the blessing, and then we'll get into Sukkot and the wedding party, and then some of these other